My last video about market conditions talked about seasonality, and there's something that we should discuss that relates to seasonality, and that is how we're actually characterizing the market. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but there's a problem when using a gerund. So a gerund is a noun that's being turned into a verb by the use of an ing on the end. So if we're talking about increasing or declining, and the problem with gerunds is that they are agnostic when it comes to the time frame. So how long has it been increasing? And how long are we projecting this action to go into the future? And that needs to be more clearly defined. So I'm going to talk about why and how a lack of clarity on a time frame really changes your perspective on what that means right this second. Because what we're doing is we're taking a moment in time and we're saying something's happening and it's going to happen into the future. And well, what's happening right now isn't necessarily super helpful if it's if we're talking about a time frame of a day. How was the market yesterday and how is it going to be tomorrow? I think you're going to have a really hard time saying increasing or declining is something changing um, really that quickly in a day. Probably not. So I've got this chart on the screen. It's really helpful. I noticed for this point. So if we're looking at this moment in time where we are right now, technically January of 2025. I don't know when you're watching this. This is my most recent data point. If I look back 6 months, it looks pretty clearly like this market overall has been declining. But there is some seasonality in that decline. Now we talked about is some of that actual real genuine price change as opposed to compositional shift in a market. Yeah, some of it really is. But if I go back a whole year and essentially remove some of the seasonality from that, what do I see? Well, if I go back beyond the realm of the the seasonality that may be impacting me at any moment in time, in this example, it's perfectly stable. If I look at January 2024, the unit price is the same as it is right now. But if what if I go back 3 years? Same month over 3 years is much lower than it is right now. So if I'm projecting 3 years, then I have an increasing market. So what do I have? Well, at this precise moment, with including seasonality, I might still be in a declining market. If I'm going back and sort of removing seasonality at this moment in time, probably have a stable market. If I'm looking longer term, I have an increasing market. So what do I mean when I say declining, increasing, or stable? And that needs to have a little bit more meat around that definition. And I'm going to make a suggestion. Not that anybody's asked me, but I'm going to make it anyway. I think it would be much better not to use a gerund there and just to say, what has the market done historically over a given period of time? And it would be really helpful if that given period of time were something useful for the intended use. For me, my interpretation of if you're using an appraisal for risk management into the future, you're probably projecting more than a month, more than a year. So I think it would be much more helpful for me to say, okay, say it's a 3 year time frame I'm looking at. Um, well, historically, over 3 years, my market has increased. Do I believe that this is going to project into the future as an increasing market, or has something changed that might uh, reverse course. So I might, in my market, say I'm in a very diverse economy where we have a continual influx of residents to my market area. And so I believe that long term, there's going to be increasing prices. If for nothing else, then the value of a dollar keeps changing. So at a minimum, that much. So the okay, so an appraiser in a different market, you might be appraising in a market where maybe you are heavily influenced by a single industry or maybe even a single company, and the the impact on your prices where they have been and where they might go into the future may be highly dependent on, well, how's that company doing? How's that industry doing? So that might change things in terms of if I'm in a market and maybe 6 months ago, uh, the the company which is the bedrock of the generation of demand for my community, my market area, maybe they've had layoffs, maybe they're really struggling, and that might be something that I might project in the future. Yeah, long term prices have increased. Do I think that that's going to project into the future? I don't think it's wise to make that projection. I really think, given the fact that there's been a shift in that industry, in that community, that I believe you might be lucky to have stable prices, and it might be likely to have declining prices. I think that'd be much more helpful and a really good use of a local appraiser who understands why people live where they live. What do people do here? Why are they here? And that really is going to be, in my opinion, a much more helpful way, and especially helpful in terms of taking into consideration that seasonal impact on prices at any given moment. There's more we could say about that, but I really that would be where I'd want to leave it. Is there's a problem with gerunds? I think we should stop using them.